Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me today, this afternoon, to talk about how to encourage our learners to think about their own thinking. My name is Rania Jabr. I'm a senior instructor 2 at the American University in Cairo in Egypt. So let's see what we're going to be covering quickly today. We have 15 minutes, and I hope I will be able to go through my presentation in the allotted time. This is what you're going to be gaining from attending my session today: the what, the empowering, the questioning, taking a step back. I will give you a gift of a sample lesson and how to adapt. So let's start by talking about our goals. What is our goal when we're teaching? When we're teaching, our goal is to have students think about their own thinking and then clarify to us instructors what they think. We keep telling them, we keep asking them, think, take a minute to think. But does this actually happen? And what are we doing ourselves to encourage them to think about their thinking and to be, better thinkers? So let's see what we need to do. Our goals are very simple and very clear, and they are 3. The first goal is to create connected thinkers. We want to make sure that the learners connect with what they're reading, what they're writing, what they're watching, the video, if it's a video. So we want connected thinkers. And we also want, obviously, critical thinkers who don't just agree with whatever they read or hear or watch. They actually think about the content. And we also need students who have a voice. And this is extremely important. This is one of the end results of this presentation, is to give our students voice, to share their opinions. So what do we mean when we say students need to think about their thinking? We want to teach them how to explore what they're interested in, to investigate, to conduct research about what they're interested in. And I'm going to come back to this point in a minute. We want them to be passionate about their own learning, about their own gains, about their own progress, about the little gains and achievements they make as they are learning. And we want to give them a purpose. When they have a purpose to what they're doing, then they learn. All this is done despite, irrespective of whatever skill you're teaching, through think aloud protocols. And I'm a firm believer in this. So let me recap. We want the students to have passion. We want to ignite their passion. And we want to have them be curious, to ignite their curiosity. The passion means or refers to what they're interested in. So try to choose topics they're interested in. And of course, when they're interested in something, they're curious to learn. So if we take a minute and think, okay, yeah, we got the thinking about your thinking, but what are the skills that a student has or is able to demonstrate that actually tells us that X or Y can think about his or her thinking? Let's see, I'm sure you know them, but I just decided to put them all together in one slide. The first thing is analyzing, how to analyze an article, how to analyze a text, how to analyze a video. Then comes comparing and contrasting between different texts, between different videos, between different audio recordings. Then comes interpreting. They've read something and they have to take a step backwards and maybe say, oh, this means that. Interpreting, making interpretations from written or video texts, and evaluating. Is it good? Is it weak? Is it bad? Is it interesting? Is it missing something? And finally, last but not least, making inferences about the author's purpose, making inferences about the main idea if it's not directly mentioned. These are the 5 main skills that we want to teach our students to do, to be able to do, so that we can call them thinkers who can think about their thinking. Let's move along. Remember, we said we want to have the students own their learning. We want to empower them, and we want them to be passionate. So what do? We want to ignite their knowledge. Okay, get them interested about something they're already interested in. I don't care if it's sports, if it's music, if it's food, if it's fashion, if it's science, if it's technology. Then support them and scaffold their learning. This is a very important step. We cannot assume that they know, and I will tell you how in a minute. Support their learning. And while they're learning, we want to synthesize or combine two things. The information they learn, they're gathering information, they're doing research, they're exploring, even a simple act as Googling something, and synthesize the skills of reading and writing and grammaring and vocabulary, finding the main ideas, all these skills. And of course, last but not least, since we want them to be thinkers, we want them to problem solve. So the end goal or the end step is get them to solve a problem, to apply their learning. This gives them a sense of purpose. If we stop at the synthesis, it's not enough. We want to give them a mission that they need to accomplish. So thus we are giving the students the power to learn. Thus we're giving the students the ability to be autonomous and think about their learning. So it's a process of self-knowledge. Each step of the way, they are discovering information about themselves. They're finding out about themselves and their abilities, whether they can do or they can't do. What are the areas of weakness? What are the things that they need to focus on? So it's just like a journey in self-learning and self-discovery, to then stand and say, oh, I'm a critical thinker. I can think about my thinking and I can enunciate it and I can share it with my audience. All right. So we need to ask them questions. We need to ask the students questions to get them to think about their thinking. I'm going to start with the end in sight. First of all, remember, I'm referring to connections. And I will tell you what do I mean by connections, making connections. But first, we want to start with reflection. We want to ask students reflective questions, reasoning questions, analysis questions, and finally move to the connections. The reflection questions are the simplest, the easiest. Okay. Do you agree or disagree? Tell me what you think. Tell me if it's true or false. You know, the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, what. Okay, fine. They can look at a text or an article and to reflect. Then they got a reason, which is a little bit harder because it's a higher level of thinking. Then they start arguing against. It's very easy to argue for a point. You know, it's harder. We want to take the high road and get them to argue against the passage, against the video, against the audio. And of course, give us their reasons, okay? And when they're talking about an issue, they need to talk about the effects of that issue and the solutions to the issue. These are the cornerstones, the 4 cornerstones of arguing and reasoning about a text or the content of a video or a film. And now we're going to move to a higher step where there's a little bit of analysis when they start comparing and contrasting similarities and differences, maybe with other texts, maybe with other videos, maybe with other concepts. And they need to explain these similarities, why, and the tons of possibilities of other scenarios, alternative scenarios, and finally to predict the outcome, to predict what can happen maybe, I don't know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. The goal is to get the students to make connections, not only between texts that we teach in class from day to day or in a semester, but to compare also to their community, their life, their society, and hopefully the world itself. So we're not just comparing what they're reading or what they're viewing in videos, but we're comparing what they're viewing and reading to themselves, to their society, and what happens in the world, maybe, you know, other parts of the world, other communities. These are the questions that we should be asking our students. I can't leave this topic without talking about making the learning visible. And by this, I mean using ways to get the students to organize their thoughts visibly. They are going to organize their thoughts and show the workflow of their thinking using graphic organizers. You all know what graphic organizers, I'm not going to go through that, but they basically put the thinking into a visual format. I want to give you a piece of advice. Step back from the learning that's taking place Get them to argue, to discuss in a Socratic method, get them to play devil's advocate. Don't just let them agree with the text or agree with what the speaker said. Give them case studies. This will give them autonomy and would allow them basically to see the different shades of gray, the different nuances between topics, between meanings, between ideas. And finally, of course, get them to self-assess and peer assess, peer evaluation and self-assessment. I know this is not as an assessment presentation, but I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. So they need to assess themselves and need to assess the work of their peers. All right. Now we want to trigger students thinking about their thinking. So how do we do that? Like ignite. I'm using the word ignite very, very cautiously and very carefully, and I really mean it. We want to give them cues. So this is not the time to forget that we can have them brainstorm. Just brain dump. Tell me everything you know about this subject. Write it on a piece of paper or type it up in a Google Doc. Give them bell ringers and exit tickets at the beginning of class, at the end of class, to find out how they're thinking, what they're thinking. Get them to sketch and doodle. This is a very now a topical issue to get the students to, they don't have to be Picasso's, or Rembrandt's, but basically they can sketch and doodle a visual representation, even if it's a little diagram of what they read or what they watched. And graphic organizers, I cannot even begin to tell you how useful they are, and infographics. They can either create a poster about what they're thinking or find one ready-made online. Obviously, they can write a journal, and this is where reflection happens. They can just at the end of class or at the beginning of class for 10 minutes as an assignment, write a one-piece journal about what are they thinking? How did they write? How was their process of thinking when they were writing their essay? Or what were they thinking when they were watching the video? Journaling is very useful. And the next thing is, of course, as I said, think aloud. Think aloud strategies have been in the literature for years. People often ignore them and forget about them, but they are very, very useful. Tell me what went on in your mind as you were doing X or Y. It can be oral or it can be written. I promise to give you what happens in my class. This is what happens in my class. I get the students to choose a topic they are passionate about, extremely important. Then I have them give an elevator pitch, a 1-minute pitch, or create an e-poster of their topic of choice. This is still in the stage of selecting the topics. I get them to do the research. They read up, they summarize their findings, they Google, they do some research in the library, and they, in groups, start conducting interviews about people and what they think of this topic. It can be a Google form. They can create Google forms. If you're not very tech savvy and your students are not, they can just basically write pen and paper questions and answers. Then comes the real time of a big presentation. They present to peers what they have done, and their peers give them cool feedback. A 5 to 7 minute presentation using a PowerPoint. Then they write an essay. When they write an essay, they are putting to paper the sum total of what they've written. The essay, because this is a writing class, is the sum total of the ideas that they've collected, the information they've collected. And then they write a 1-page, let's say 800 words, 600 word reflection, 600 to 800 word reflection in writing on the whole process. I'm almost done, but please remember that we're going to try to change the students from being reactors to interactors. We want them to interact with the documents, with the data, with the videos, with the audios. We want them to engage, not just comply. Watch a video and tell me what you think about it. Make it a habit. Make thinking a habit. The effects are quite known, of course. This is my last slide. They learn from their mistakes. They focus on what they are learning, and they revisit their old thinking. And many times they come to me and they say, oh, well, I didn't think that way. I used to think da, 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 da. So they're rethinking about their thinking, owning their learning, and they're becoming lifelong learners. It's a great feeling of accomplishment and pride. Thank you very much.